Corrections of alpha, the alpha uh, assignment number 1. Question number 1 was a calculation exercise, all 3 parts, A, B, and C. So as you see, we have 3 important numbers here, and then a fundamental assumption. So the numbers are, there are 1,120,000 unemployed people, and there are 29,500,000 employed people. So this will obviously constitute the labor force. And then there are 11 million people who are not in the labor force. And we're to assume that they are all adults, as the question indicates. So there are 3 parts to this question. How big was the labor force? How was the labor force, or what was the labor force participation rate? And what was the unemployment rate? And obviously I wanted to see all the calculations. How big was the labor force? So this is part A, yeah? Let's call it part A. So let's see. There are 29,500,000 employed people, workers. And there are 1,120,000 unemployed people. Again, what constitutes being unemployed? You don't have a job and you are actively looking for a job. That's what we mean by unemployment. So add them up, number of employed people plus the number of unemployed people, and you get the labor force. So what do we have here? 30,620,000 people. All right, that is the labor force. And that's going to be utilized in calculating the labor force participation rate and also the unemployment rate. What was the unemployment rate? So here are the calculations. The unemployment rate is equal to the number, this hash designation means number, so number of unemployed people divided by the labor force, and we have to multiply this by 100 because we're dealing with the unemployment rate. So what is the number of unemployed people? Let's see. It's given to us as 1,120,000 people divided by the labor force, and we already calculated the labor force. That's 30,622,000 times 100 will give us an unemployment rate of 3.66%. What was the labor participation or labor force participation rate. So let's call this C, all right? So the labor force participation rate is equal to the labor force divided by the working age population, and we have to multiply this by 100 because we are attempting to calculate the a rate. All right. So what is the labor force? We've already calculated that to be 30,620,000. What is the working age population? 41,620,000. We multiplied this by 100, and we get a labor force participation rate of 73.57%. All right? Okay. Question 2. Are the following workers more likely to experience a short-term or long-term unemployment? And then you had to explain. For A construction worker laid off because of bad weather. I think that's short run or short term. When the bad weather goes away, the construction worker goes back to work. Unless we're dealing with, shall we say, bad weather that continues for a very, very, very long time. You could have made the argument there. I mean, you could have talked about global warming. You just had to make an argument. That was my point. All right. B, a manufacturing worker who loses her job at a plant in an isolated area. Well, this seems to lean more towards the long run or long-term unemployment. You lose your job in an isolated area. In other words, there are no other job clusters in the area. And, well, I guess the assumption is also that you're not willing to relocate. So this would be structured employment, right? It's the idea of regionalism. Okay. In C, the scenario is interesting. A railway industry worker is laid off because of competition from the car industry. Well, some of you made the short run argument. Most of you have argued, well, most of you who used this logic said, in both cases, you are a manufacturing worker, and it's not going to take you that much time to switch skills from the railroad industry to the car industry. And some of you argued that this would cause long-run unemployment or long-term unemployment because in some cases, I guess, the two industries would be far apart at, let's say, opposite ends of a country. Others argued that the skills are not compatible and it would take a long time to, shall we say, acquire new skills to move from one industry to another industry. Again, I accepted both answers, provided you gave a logical explanation. Question 3. Well, this was to be an essay question. Some of you did not take a lot of time to research it, a lot of time to think about it. You didn't really spend a lot of time to analyze it and evaluate this question. Now, Karl Marx is the father of communism. He was very critical of capitalism. So the question reads, why, according to Karl Marx, does capitalism need a reserve army of the unemployed? So, I mean, fundamentally, Karl Marx was very much anti-capitalistic, and his argument was the following. Capitalism needs unemployment because the greater the greater the unemployment level, the more bargaining power the employers will have. So employers will be able to lower wages, and lower wages are obviously a lower cost of production, and that would translate into higher profits for the companies, higher profits for the bosses. It's a very, shall we say, antagonistic relationship, which is being implied here. It's the owners of capital, the industrialists, versus the owners of labor, meaning the workers. This reserve army of unemployed is good for capitalistic profits. It seems like a cynical answer, but that was really the gist of the answer. You did not do well on this question. Please, on other questions of this type, do more research and do more critical work. All right.